John Muir. Written by Kira Freed. Focus question. What impact did John Muir have on wilderness areas in the United States? A passion for nature. Long ago, when people in the United States were settling the West, many people spoke about conquering nature. They cleared land and used it however they wished for houses, food, and clothing. John Muir instead spoke of honoring nature. Muir was a champion of wild places, a gifted writer and speaker, and the founder of an important organization. His words inspired many people to make an effort to protect wilderness. They also helped bring about the protection of many nature areas, including Yosemite Valley. Early life. John Muir was born on April 21, 1838, in Scotland. John was the oldest son in a family with 8 children. When John was 11, the family moved to Wisconsin in the United States so his father could start a farm. John's father was very strict and forced his children to work long hours doing farm labor. He only allowed them one small meal a day. The children's health suffered as a result. John did not attend school during those years, but he loved to learn. His father allowed him to wake up early to have time to read. John rose at 1 a.m. each morning. He studied many different subjects on his own. If he had any free time during the day, he explored the woods and fields around the family farm. During John's teen years, he spent part of his early morning time working on inventions. One of his inventions, a special alarm clock, pushed him out of bed at a set time. Freedom and wild places. By the time Muir was a young adult, he was restless to follow his passions. When he was 22, he showed his inventions at a state fair in Madison. The inventions, especially Muir's alarm clock, were a huge hit. A judge awarded him a cash prize that gave him some independence for the first time. Instead of going home, he stayed in Madison. He started college that fall. Muir mainly studied math and science, including the science of plants. In 1863, he left Madison to attend what he called the University of the Wilderness. Muir traveled on foot around parts of Canada and the Midwest. He took odd jobs to pay his way. In 1866, Muir took a job as a mechanic. The next year, a work accident briefly blinded him. Though he feared he would lose his sight for good, it returned a month later. Muir suddenly realized he wasn't doing what he loved most. He left his job to spend the rest of his life in nature. Muir took off on September 1, 1867, hiking about 1,000 miles, 1,609 kilometers, to Florida. He reached the coast in just over 7 weeks. The next March, he went to San Francisco. When he arrived, he asked someone to show him the closest way out of town. When the man asked where he wanted to go, Muir replied, "To any place that is wild." The High Sierra. Traveling on foot, Muir headed for California's Sierra Nevada mountains. The beauty of the area amazed him. Muir's first trip was short, but he went back the following year. He worked briefly as a shepherd, and later he ran a sawmill near Yosemite Falls. Muir spent his free time exploring the land. He drew inspiration from the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who often wrote about connecting with nature. In the early 1870s, Muir suggested that the movement of glaciers had shaped Yosemite Valley. At the time, most people thought that Yosemite had formed after an earthquake. Muir traveled deep into the mountains to look for signs of glaciers. In October 1871, his efforts paid off. After tracking the paths of glaciers that had melted long before, he found an actual glacier. He published an article about his idea, and it was later proved. People were beginning to pay attention to Muir. Other people who studied and loved nature traveled to his cabin in Yosemite to meet him, including Emerson in 1871. Nature writer and activist. In 1873, Muir moved to Oakland, California, to write magazine articles about nature. He wrote to call attention to nature's beauty and to ask people to protect it. In April 1880, Muir married Louisa Louie Wanda Strentzel. He moved to her family's fruit ranch. After a long trip to Alaska, he cut back on his travels for 7 years and worked on the ranch. However, Muir was unhappy with ranch work. With Louie's support, he started traveling again. Louie Wanda Strentzel. Louie Wanda Strentzel, 1847 to 1905, was the only child of Polish immigrants. She received a formal education and achieved a perfect score in every subject she studied. She was musically gifted and could have been a concert pianist, but preferred a quiet life on the family farm. Louie was supportive of her husband's passion for nature areas, but did not share it. They had 2 daughters, Wanda and Helen. After traveling to Yosemite in 1889, Muir published 2 articles about the area's beauty. Other people worked with Muir by asking the government to protect Yosemite. The next year, Yosemite became the 3rd U.S. national park. In 1892, Muir helped found the Sierra Club to keep the Sierra Nevada protected, and he became its first president. The Sierra Club is now a leading conservation organization. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt asked to meet with Muir. The president wanted to better understand the needs of wilderness areas in the West. Honored, Muir took him on a camping trip into Yosemite. During the trip, Muir asked the president to set aside wilderness areas as protected parks. As a result of that trip, more areas of Yosemite became part of the national park. Roosevelt also set aside many other wilderness areas for protection. In his later years, Muir spent more time writing about his travels. He also led a 12-year fight to protect a valley in Yosemite from being flooded by a dam. Even with efforts to stop the project, including a letter Muir wrote to government members, it was approved in 1913. The fight raised awareness about the protection of wild places. It also helped lead to the creation of the National Park Service, NPS, in 1916. The NPS set up stronger protections for all U.S. national parks. John Muir died on December 24, 1914. Although he did not live to see the creation of the National Park Service, his efforts helped make it a reality. Muir's legacy. John Muir was a founding father of the conservation movement. He was one of the first people to call for taking action to protect wild places. John Muir struggled for years to find his true path in life. Yet nature always called to him, inviting him to know it better. Over time, his purpose became clear. Muir's contributions to conservation have earned him a place of honor in American history. Connections. Writing. Imagine you are presenting John Muir with an award for his accomplishments. Write a speech explaining the award and the reasons John Muir is receiving it. Social studies. Create a brochure about a national park in the United States. Include information and images about its history and reasons people would want to visit it.